Lovely. Well, thank you all. Welcome. I will be stepping in for Jensina, who will be a few minutes late for this meeting because she's interviewing the new police auditor. Something in that process. I'm not quite sure what. But for our agenda today, we've got the normal agenda, normal meetings review, and we are hoping to move public comments to before the chief's report. We've seen that there's some interest about attending this meeting and giving public comments. We want to make sure that they don't have to wait all meeting. We'll get some feedback. So does anybody have any changes to the agenda that they'd like? Well, if you do think of anything or you find something later on, scrivener's error, misspelled name or whatever, go ahead and just send those emails to Jeremy and put the scrivener's errors there. Does anybody have any changes to the agenda that they would like to make? I'd like to move public comment to before chief's report after commissioner's report. Unless there's any objection, I'm going to do that.
My only point to that is that it's advertised as being at 7:55. If someone shows up at 7:55 for public comment, I would suggest that we would honor that and allow them public comment.
I would like to do that as well. I'll make sure to let Jensina know that that is the plan.
Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback. Now let's kick it off. Jack, do you want to go first with your commissioner comment?
Sure, I'll pass.
Alan?
Thank you. My only comment is I wanted to thank whoever put this packet together for the red line of the policy, and I hope other people find that to be somewhat useful. And I know it's work, and I want to just express appreciation for that effort to whoever it is that did that. So thank you.
Excellent. Let's go Jennifer Ye and then William.
Yeah, I don't have any liaison reports. I mean, you already mentioned we're doing police auditor interviews. Randy and I are doing that tomorrow, all day, pretty much. I think that's about it right now.
Thank you. Let's do William and then Amelia.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on the record that I felt that the comments that were directed towards me last week were a microaggression. And I wouldn't really bring it up if it hadn't been for the microaggressions that I have experienced before from the particular commissioner. And so I just ask that this commissioner understand their privilege and to check it. Thank you.
Thanks, William. Amelia and then Clay.
Thank you. I want to first thank Mr. Cleversey for filling in and getting us our agenda and getting us here on time, and also just well wishes to Holly and her family. Thank you.
Sure. Hi. I will briefly give a report from the Civilian Review Board, which met on Tuesday, and we reviewed a case that included the use of pepper spray. And so we looked at the policy related to pepper spray, which has a more fancy name that I'm not going to remember, but OC spray, essentially, the chemical components of pepper spray. We had a good discussion about the review of the case, and it was a good, it was a very thorough investigation that the chain of command found through that investigation that the officer was working within policy, and the auditor's office disagreed and said it was a sustained violation of policy. And the Civilian Review Board members, two Civilian Review Board members sided with the chain of command, saying it was within policy, and 3 said it should have been a sustained violation of policy. So just to give you a context of how we felt about that, I think there's an interesting sort of read of the policy and how it's enacted on the ground. And so I know we're not meant to bring up specific policies that we will review sooner or later on this commission, but the interesting part of the pepper spray policy was this question of how do you define passive resistance? And that was where the nuance was in the decision making between the auditor's office and the chain of command at the police department. So just something to note that was an interesting discussion that is maybe worth looking at in terms of policy going forward. So that's it.
I know that was a big discussion when we reviewed the policy last time, so thanks for reviewing it. Thanks for taking a look and bringing it back to us. I think Randy and anyone left for public or for commissioner comments.
Well, thank you, Chair. I'm still new to the process. This is only my second meeting. I'm still trying to find my bubble so I know which way is up. So with that, glad to be here.
For my comments, I just want to thank our folks coming in to do public comment. Do we have anybody who is waiting to give public comment online? Good question. It looks like we have a couple of folks.
You want to invite them to raise their hands.
Yeah, if you want to give public comment, go ahead and raise your hands now. And we will start working our way through those. If you missed the beginning of the meeting, we're going to be doing it now before the chief's comments. And then if anybody missed their opportunity, because we advertised it at the end of the meeting, we don't want to skip out on anybody. So the plan is to do it at the end as well. Looks like Bridget, you're up to give your public comment. I've got these little paddles. I'll wave them. You can't see on the screen, it's too far away. But I'll start
No, I
waving.
can see it.
Okay, good.
Well, thank you all for allowing me to speak. I'm Bridget. I work with Black Thistle Street Aid. I'm the co-director. We're a medical outreach team in town providing free medical care to folks living on the street. Usually we do roving outreach to encampments or just about anywhere in town. I'm just speaking tonight. I noticed you'll be talking about behavioral health and mental health crises, which is great and needed. In addressing mental health and behavioral health concerns, first and foremost, I want to name that sweeps EPD facilitates with the city of Eugene exacerbate this issue greatly and are inherently traumatic and degrading acts. But most concerning to me is the consistent uptick of trespass citations and sweeps during extreme weather events like heat waves or the ice storm we just had. And so I'm asking the commission to reconsider EPD's role in these actions. I'm sure, as you're all aware, Eugene has the highest per capita rate of homelessness in our country, and this is a very complicated issue, but it's something that needs to be addressed. Your IPO or PIO, Melinda McLaughlin, had said that EPD is not involved in encampment cleanups or sweeps, but I have personally witnessed EPD at almost every single sweep I've been at, which is too many to count at this point. I've also seen EPD surround a disabled person, like completely surround him, demanding that he clean up his encampment in 15 minutes or less or else face jail time. And this was a person who already had institutional trauma, so he was escalated. I've seen EPD line people up along public roads and sidewalks for anyone driving by or walking by to see, making a public show of anyone whose belongings are getting thrown out or being ticketed. This has a horrible impact on a person's mental health or their general will to live or willingness to engage in society. I've also heard of EPD showing up at encampments late in the evening to threaten people, giving them 15 minutes or less to go. And this is sometimes evenings where there's freezing temperatures, but warming centers aren't open, it's raining. And I just want you all to imagine having to pack your belongings in 15 minutes or less at a place you've lived for 6 months or more with a person with a gun on their hip telling you to move. Like, can you imagine?
Thank you so much, Bridget, for your comments. The time we got a few to get through. I encourage you to send us an email as well if you have any more comments, as well as the other city departments, like the Parks Department, which is behind deciding when sweeps happen. Would one of you, or is one of you prepared to give public comment?
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. If you want to sit here, you'll be on camera and part of the public record.
Oh, sure. Hi, I'm Emily. I'd like to echo concerns brought by Bridget about how EPD interacts with people who are in crisis and on the streets. Not just when it comes to sweeps, but when it comes to general interactions and how personal items are treated for people on the streets. Oftentimes, I've heard people quoting like protecting private property, but I think there's concern about private property and the property of citizens who are in crisis and who are unhoused. Learn more about that policy and see how EPD is responding.
Thank you. I also want to mention for you and anybody else who is interested, all of Eugene Police policy is up on the website. If you send us an email, I will reply with the direct link. I'm not at my computer right now, but I can make sure to get that to you. Thank you. Do you want to get one as well? Sure.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Harper. I'm also still trying to figure out all of this work and find my bubble, but for what it's worth, would like to add my support to the same sentiment. I share a similar concern with how some of the most vulnerable members of our society being viewed as members of our society, and would like to add a little bit of confusion and unclarity in the role that renters have in deciding how their own and place of space is policed, because I understand that I understand why too, that property owners largely make that decision or are contacted about that, but as someone that's lived somewhere and paid to live somewhere for 4 or 5 years, I think it's important to feel included in that process or feel like you have a say about the space.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any other attendees who would like to give public comments? Thank you all, and if you stick around, I appreciate it. Hope you enjoy. Chief's report.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and for those of you that made public comment, you can stick around because I'm gonna try and provide some clarity around some things that I heard where it feels like in some instances EPD tends to be the easy part of the city to place blame because we're one of the most visible when it comes to this particular issue, and I'll address that in a second. From the perspective of Chief's report, there's not much to report other than we're continuing hiring. We've got goodness, as many as 30 officers in training at this point. I don't know how many we have up in the academy, but it's a lot. We got a class of 8 or 9 that are there, and then another class that's up there that's going to graduate soon. So we got a lot. We've got a lot of new police officers coming online, being trained right now. So that's hopeful. The last couple of hiring cycles have not yielded a ton of good applicants, but we're making progress. We have a few retirements at the end of the next couple of months, but we are dangerously close to double or to single digits vacancies. And remember, it wasn't so long ago that our vacancy rate was almost 32. So we're making progress, which is really good. There's one specific effort that I think is of note for this group when we think about trying to serve this community in a more robust and equitable way, is we are building a business case for a precinct that would move part of our operations out to West Eugene. Mostly the location we're looking at is strategically located close to the 11th Avenue corridor. We see a huge amount of property theft out on West 11th. For instance, the Target store out there, nationwide, Target experiences anywhere from 3 to 4% loss through shoplift. This Target experiences close to 17% loss of shoplift, and there's just things walking out the door. That's Walmart's in the same spot. We need to do something about our retail theft that's happening in and around the West 11th corridor. So we are building a business case to try and move some police resources out there and maybe co-locate with some special equipment that we need a place for. That would free up a building that's in a strategic location for housing development in and around the downtown area. And so there's some real upside to being able to move that. And we want to be on both sides of the river. Makes a lot of sense. Country Club is not the greatest place to deploy from when you're trying to get to West Eugene. So we're gonna continue to work on it. So could be an exciting project, but there's a lot of dominoes that need to fall before we get there. But it's something that I think is worth noting, that we're trying to be mindful about that. With regard to the public comments, you know, I've mentioned this a few times, and I know this is hard, and it's hard for our community. It's hard for us sometimes to recognize the multitude and various complexities that go into our unhoused population and where they choose to kind of set up their camps and or reside. It's a multitude of private property, public property, commercial property, ODOT property, Union Pacific or BNSF property. It's just, it's like doing long division to figure out what are the requirements for these properties. The public property is the property that mostly is being associated with what people are calling sweeps. And I take exception to that because we're not necessarily, we're relocating people, asking people to leave after they've been properly posted for a period of time and offered resources and services elsewhere. And EPD is merely there as oversight because we've had, as public works crew, and the open public space cleanup crew comes in to be able to clean up and close that area, have been met with some levels of hostility. So EPD is there mostly in the sense of safety and security for city staff. In a few instances, we've been met with some resistance and have had to at least ask people to leave and be subject to some kind of law enforcement action if they choose not to leave. But it's not done in a sense that we just arbitrarily show up and decide to move people without proper notice. That gets vetted, in almost no case is that initiated by the police department. That's usually initiated by Parks and Open Space in conjunction with Public Works to be able to do that. In the other instances, we're fielding, I will tell you, the #1 call for service in the city of Eugene is trespass call. It outpaces all the calls for service by a wide margin. It's the only city I've ever been a chief at or been a police officer in that it's been the #1 call for service. We have a lot of people that call us about people trespassing on their private property, their commercial property, and then what they see as trespass on railroad property and or ODOT property. So you have these people calling that are victims of trespass asking for help. And we try to serve them the best we can. And in those cases, that is law enforcement action because it is a Class B misdemeanor in some respects, and in other respects, like with the railroad property, it's a Class A misdemeanor, a criminal trespass in the first degree. And so we try the best we can to meet those folks' needs, and we can't keep pace with the amount of calls for service that we get. In most, if not all of those cases, we take great care in trying to figure out if there's a shelter space for that person to go to and or offering some level of services. Oftentimes, property is abandoned and left there for cleanup. In other cases, if law enforcement action is taken, and when I say law enforcement action, I mean physical custody, that's very rare that we're taking anybody to jail for these things. We are bound by our policy, which means that if we take responsibility for their personal belongings and we inventory those and keep those for safekeeping. If it's police action, if it's not police action, it's a different mechanism by which those belongings are stored. But we are going to really work hard this next year to pay attention to the #1 call for service in our city, which is criminal trespass, and asking people to make sure that they're choosing not to camp or reside on other people's personal property or private property in this case. And then the separate mechanism is the open public space, which has a different threshold with a level of posting and closure that is initiated by the city. So I understand that when you see EPD officers on scene, it can feel like it is their activity or their action that they've initiated. But I can assure you that largely we're there in support other activity that the city is going through. So we'll continue to be ethical, moral, and legal about our behavior. And if there are, as always, if there's policy adjustments that need to be made, we will entertain those. The one thing I would remind people that are listening and for the police commission is your influence is around policy language, not necessarily operations and how we run the operations. And sometimes that can feel they can be very close cousins to each other and feel very much like you want to influence operations. But we determine operationally what we feel like is the best approach, and then we ask you to help us build really good, equitable policy language around that. And in most cases, we already have a really good baseline for policy, and we're happy to break those open and make the tweaks where we need to as the commission decides that that's important to do. So that is all for my chief's report.
Thanks. I've got a couple questions. I see William's hand up. If anybody else has questions, go ahead and raise your hand. I will start with my question, which is my first question, which is that it sounds like public works is one of the driving forces behind what folks are calling sweeps. So they don't have a commission, it sounds like. So do they just contact public works directly if they have feedback?
Well, yeah, I mean, most of what Parks and Open Space, which is a part of the Public Works Department, is, you know, their policies, procedures around closing down open public property is informed by city attorney's office. They set the guidelines for that, and that's deeply rooted in case law. And mostly Ninth Circuit case law here on the West Coast. And so if there are issues with the closing of a certain area and the posting of the certain area after the obligatory amount of time coming in and asking people to leave, and in most cases, people have already left by the time the waiting period is over. If they have issue with the city initiating those closures, then that's where I would point them, is to Parks and Open Space.
Thank you. Let's do William. Do you still have a comment, William?
Yeah. So I heard you speaking a little bit about the 11th Street corridor, and I'm curious if you could speak at all about the department's policy. I don't know if it's a shift, but the policy around 7th Street and the quality of life crimes that are I saw like a report on recently. And further with that, I'm curious what the department's kind of planning is going to be around offering diversion, because from looking at some of those arrest reports, it seemed like a big focus of those quality of life crimes was associated around possession of controlled substances. And so I think it's important for the commission to look at that policy because people are being affected right now by that.
So I'm gonna take a stab, Commissioner Parham, that you're referring to. I don't know anything specifically that has to do with 7th Street. There's been no like specific focus on 7th Street. If there's been activity or police activity on 7th Street, it wouldn't surprise me, but it's not.
The department announced 7 arrests last week that were all around the 7th Street corridor, and they've said that the focus was on quality of life crimes.
So we happen to arrest 7 people in the same area, and that focuses on quality of life crimes. So the key piece of information there is we're not talking about diversion, which is inside the justice system or post-justice system. We're talking about deflection. In this case, there's certain crimes that are eligible for deflection up into including a possession charge, a simple possession charge, and any other quality of life crimes that person might be involved in. And so where appropriate that we're making those contacts and building those probable cause cases, we are trying to deflect those people that are eligible for deflection and are willing to take deflection because it has to be voluntary. And in the other cases, if deflection is not appropriate or they choose not to go the deflection route, then the standard criminal justice municipal court route it usually is the remedy. And some of those might be diverted into community court, depending on the location and the type of crime. And maybe others are just standard muni court. But it's kind of a case by case basis, depending on the crime, depending on whether the person's eligible and whether or not they're choosing or willing to go through deflection. That's likely what you're seeing is some of those cases.
I'm curious if, because I didn't mean to blindside you with this, but I'm curious if we could have this conversation after you saw the report that I'm referring to.
We certainly can. I'm happy to do that if you want to let me know what you're referring to, and I'll take a look at it and see that and know that in some instances, because of deflection or the possibility of deflection is a Lane County program, that there may be some things that we can't influence in that. But I'm happy to have this conversation with you if there's a piece of information I should review prior to our conversation.
Thank you both. Let's do Randy and then me.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And I just wanted to say that I'm the city councilor for the West 11th Avenue corridor from City View to the city limits. And we have had problems. It's the #1 issue I hear is both property crimes, vandalism, intimidation, and trespass. And, you know, it's not just police and public works and parks and open space. I'm frequently asking for help because people are losing tens of thousands of dollars in equipment. And it's just a problem. I mean, we had, when I first took office in '81, we had RVs and trailers lying on both sides of the street. Businesses were shutting down and sending their workforce home without pay because they couldn't get their materials in or their finished products out because the streets were jammed. We had raw sewage flowing down the streets, and there was a food preparation place in West Eugene that the state health department gave them threats of shutting them down because that's an Ebola or not Ebola. It's a medical problem. It's something that you can get. I'm forgetting the name of the disease you get from human feces, but it's cholera. Well, cholera, but there's
Dysentery.
More, yeah. It's nasty. And you know, the flip side is we also have Everyone Village in my council ward, who I've worked with from the very beginning, and they're doing great things to help lift people up. Our goal should be moving people into help programs. We need that on one end, but we also need to follow up and make sure we're not losing our economy, which is businesses moving out, and businesses have moved out. We also need to make sure that our residents that are living in the area, renters and homeowners, are protected as well. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work going on. I think the city staff has become much more responsive, but I stopped and watched a clearing of an underpass on the Fern Ridge bike path about a month ago. And I just walked up, kept my distance, but was just observing. And I was really impressed with the professionalism and the way the police officers and the public works staff approached the group there. They showed respect. They treated people kindly. They were trying to help, but they had to move along. They were within 100 feet of high bank of a waterway. That's a pollution problem. And that's part of the our camping ordinance. So anyway, we have a problem, most definitely, and we need to find solutions to the problem. We have some solutions, but you know, it's a intractable problem that's really bigger than the size of community that we have. But I just want to say I have seen compassion from our police officers and our public works staff. So you know, I'm not seeing what you're seeing, but that doesn't mean there aren't some problems. But I just wanted you to hear the other side of the story. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. I would like a question that actually plays really well into that, which is Sergeant Smith was integral in getting a lot of the Conestoga huts and identifying locations. I was wondering if anybody, because she's retired for folks who aren't aware, has anybody been able to pick up that torch and carry it forward?
I think not in the same way that Sergeant Smith did. I mean, we have to remember that the time in which she was engaged was a much different time. I bet we've increased our shelter capacity 1,000% compared to when we were trying to locate, 30 Conestoga huts between the safe sleep sites and everything through the pandemic. So and we have a function at the city that's much more focused on our homeless or unhoused response. So that's all before we really kind of had more of a city effort to do that. I mean, at the end of the day, her level of compassion, this was a passion project for her, trying to keep the police department doing what police departments should be doing, and let the experts in that field do the work with her. So nobody has picked that up. And if I could, I mean, just to Commissioner Parham's point, I'm just going to read what he's referring to so that everybody has context for his question and what we put out. And it looks as if we did in fact do a focus patrol initiated by patrol and probably watch commander after, and this is the press release, businesses and residents in West 6th and 7th area reporting increasing problems, including overdoses, trespass, and other crimes. And on March 3rd, Eugene Police detached 2 officers conduct focus patrols on quality of life crimes in the West 7th and 6th area, including criminal trespass. Criminal trespass in general has become one of the most frequent calls for service by the public. And it says the following people were warned, cited, and were arrested with some offered deflection under the House Bill 4002 enacted programs. Under deflection, people facing low-level charges that affect quality of life in the community may be offered treatment for substance use disorders instead of arrest. And it goes on, and I won't name the names, but 23-year-old individual lodged on 4 warrants, which we have no discretion on, by the way. Another 30-year-old individual refused deflection, cited for criminal trespass in the 2nd degree. Another 30-year-old individual refused deflection, cited for criminal trespass in the 2nd degree. Another individual, 35, offered and selected deflection for criminal trespass in the 2nd degree. And then on West 6, an individual, 45, camping next to a motel, no signs. He was just warned and field interviewed for no trespassing. Another individual, 46, lodged on possession of methamphetamine, criminal trespass in the 2nd degree, and 2 warrants. Another individual, field interviewed and just warned for criminal trespass in the 2nd degree. Another individual cited for criminal trespass in the 2nd degree, and 2 other individuals were warned for criminal trespass in the 2nd degree. And then individuals cited in lieu of custody for criminal trespass in the 2nd degree. And another individual refused deflection and lodged for possession of methamphetamine, criminal trespass in the 2nd degree, and 3 warrants. And then there's background information on the deflection program here. So that sounds like what you were referring to, Commissioner Parham, and based on what I read here, it was a variety of our community members asking us to be there, us going down, contacting several individuals, and a variety of outcomes, both some good and some not as we would like after either people refused deflection, but it sounds like it was a good balance of citations, some custodies, and warnings to try and get people to change behavior.
So because we are running out of time, I want to run through the folks who have already asked to speak and then close queue. That'll be Jack, Clay, and Alan. Did you want to speak as well?
I had a really quick question.
Let's start with Jack first.
I'll make it as short as I can. I just want to carry Commissioner Grove's comments just a little further because, and to say and make one additional point. Everything he said is true. But there's an additional aspect to the situation, in addition to the victimization of people who suffer from vandalism, theft, trespass. There are the other members of our community who are out there on the street, and they are also victims and suffering, and both are suffering from the same malaise, which is not the fact that people are deliberately going out to live on the street because it's groovy, but because of the system we live under is not providing enough individuals and enough to allow them to have a place to live and to be able to live decently. And we have a almost complete lack of resources, although the city is certainly trying and the state is trying, and the federals will be working on the other team, I think. But we are not succeeding, and the problem is getting worse. And this is not due to the homeless. This is not due to the people who are calling in to complain about the homeless. The police end up having to pick up the pieces. And when we're looking for the source of the problem, we should be looking toward those with the resources that could fix this problem, but we are not allowed to tap. I just want to add one other thing. I have done a number of ride-alongs, and I've talked to a number of officers in the department. So I have not seen them all. I have not talked to them all. But everyone that I have talked to has expressed as much anguish about this situation as people who are actively trying to do something for the homeless express. They are torn up because they feel, here are these folks, I've got to go ask them to move, and there's nowhere for them to go. I know that. This system is crazy, it's broken. Here's this person who's having a mental crisis, and how many beds are there available for them? There just aren't. Where will most of them end up? The jail or just back on the street? And the officers who deal with this daily take it to heart as much. Now, I'm not saying that's every officer in the department. I do not know every officer in the department, but it's been consistent with everyone I've looked at. So I think it's best to focus the cause of these problems for the homeless, just like the cause of the problems would be victimized by the activities sometimes of the homeless. The same people. They're not the
That's Jack. Alan, and then Clay.
My quick question was, Chief, were you referring to the substation in the University District when you made the real estate comment about student housing? And you were saying freeing up some real estate?
No, Judge, we occupy a building in the area of Second and Lincoln right now that if we can get out of there, it's city-owned property. It's really, really attractive piece of property for residential development.
Thank you.
Clay, and then I'll hand it over to our chair after this.
That sounds great. I will be as brief as possible because I know you want to move on. Two things just for the public comment period. One is that, to reiterate what the chief said, this body looks at policy. So if there are specific policy elements that you think are inconsistent with what you think our community would, want to pursue in terms of policing policy, that's helpful recommendations from you. If you have concerns about policy implications, and you could email that to the chair and vice chair for consideration in the future. But if you think that our policy is good, and you think that you have witnessed violations of policy, that's something that you can send to the auditor's office or the civilian review board, where I sit on the civilian review board and we review cases that have been investigated. And what I can say is that every complaint gets a very thorough review by the auditor's office and by the police department. And if it goes through an investigation, it leads to, very thorough investigations into police conduct. So if that is something that you think is happening, that's the venue through which you can sort of make that official complaint. And then I have two questions. One is for the chief, or maybe for Commissioner Rady, because you said that there's nowhere for people to go when being contacted by the police. But my understanding is that current case law, previous case law required that there were options for individuals when asked to move from public property in like I'll say sweep, even though I know, Chief, you take issue with that term. Is the new Supreme Court decision that has sort of allowed for broader authority of cities and police departments in terms of asking people to move without providing resources? Is that something that's coming into play in our community? Or do you find that there are actually resources for people that you are coming into contact with that they are electing to sometimes take and sometimes not take? It'd be helpful to know sort of the clarity of that.
I'll try and answer the question as quickly as I can. So the time, place, and manner restrictions are, Oregon, Oregon adopted the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision, which started in Grants Pass. The Supreme Court has overturned that, but we're still operating under the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision right now. But I would say that that decision never suggested that it was incumbent on the city or a jurisdiction to provide an inventory so robust that it would provide for everybody's needs. I think what it intended to do is for a entity to try and provide to the best of their ability financially a place for people to go if asked to move. And we have spaces open frequently that we've asked people if they would like to go somewhere else. And you alluded to this. In some instances, people are taking us up on it. And unfortunately, in many instances, they're choosing not to. But we are acutely aware of when we have space and where we have space. And we ask people if they'd like us to point them in that direction for resources. And it is anybody's guess whether it's a yes or a no.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. The second thing is that I'm currently in San Francisco, which is why I'm not at the meeting. And I will say that non-enforcement is a real, very big issue in parts of this community. And you see the human rights issues that emerge from not dealing with individuals who are living and taking drugs on the street. And it's very, very visceral. And so I do think that we as a community, and there are 2 city council folks here too who help drive this policy. We are trying to find solutions that serve the human rights of people who are currently living outside or under circumstances where they don't have homes, and also the sort of property and human rights of other people in our community who are victims of crimes related to that potentially. So it is a tough issue, but I do think there is some enforcement that is necessary to help both sides of that equation.
Very much, Clay. With that, I will hand it over to Jensina, who is our chair. And,
thank you, Vice Chair. We have next item on the agenda is the Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Subcommittee update. Commissioner Rady?
Yes, there wasn't a meeting. We did not have sufficient members available after having rescheduled it once. We now have it scheduled for the 19th at noon. It will be available on Zoom, and we are still desperately seeking other members of this commission to sit on the subcommittee, as we are currently down to 3 members. We could take on 2 more. It will only meet for an additional 4 or 5 months. So 4 or 5 meetings is all I'm asking, but we could use another person or 2 to make sure we have those meetings. I can report that I've had some very productive discussions with Sergeant Jordan, and we are, I think, well on track to be able to produce something, if not a fully articulated policy, certainly the very solid outlines of a policy that can be filled in when we have a policy sergeant again. And the commission will be able to finalize, I believe. I'm very optimistic we are going to produce something good.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next item agenda is review of policy 418, which is mental health crisis response. The Police Commission identified the topic of mental health crisis response as number 13 under parking lot items for fiscal year 2024 and 2025 work plan. The Mental Health Crisis Response Policy 418 was last reviewed by the Police Commission on September 10, 2015, when the lieutenant over the department's crisis response described the history of the crisis intervention team program and reviewed the changes to the policy. The Police Commission approved the current policy as written at that time. However, the lieutenant, following Police Commission discussion, agreed to send the policy to Lane County Behavioral Health for feedback and comments. The policy focuses on the Eugene Police Department response to individuals who are experiencing a mental health crisis and how EPD will strive to de-escalate this situation and deal with such a person in a compassionate yet safe manner in order to protect the individual, the public, and officers. In April 2024, EPD launched its behavioral health co-responder program in collaboration with Lake County Behavioral Health, which pairs a specially trained officer with a qualified mental health professional to address the challenges associated with individuals experiencing untreated or poorly treated behavioral health issues in the downtown core area. This evening, we have joining us Officer Bo Rankin, who is with the Behavioral Co-Responder Program, to provide an update on the program as a subject matter expert and to help answer police commission questions during our policy review. Officer Rankin, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Is there any chance I could have you moved to where the camera can see you? Yeah,
Trade me. I'm trade
she just wants to get out of the camera view.
You can sit there in front of that Chief Skinner placard. You're in charge. You don't want to do it.
No.
Thank you
Don't want
so
any
much.
confusion there, sir. Thank you. All right.
Floor is yours.
Well, I didn't come prepared with anything.
It's all right. Let's talk about the program.
The program, so yeah, we've been doing that since April, mid-April. Working with the QMHP. It's been going well. We do a lot of outreach to people, a lot of kind of cold outreach to people downtown. Also, you know, we respond to a lot of calls downtown, which are primarily criminal trespass calls, disorderly subject calls. The early tracking numbers, and I haven't seen the most recent numbers. Early tracking numbers were about, I think 53% of people were turning us down for services. So we're having it's kind of an ongoing struggle getting people to engage. And these are, you know, some of the people who are the most at need and some of the most complicated clientele that we have. So, you know, we've engaged a lot with community court in that process. And so I kind of look at this as people who aren't really able to do this on themselves, on their own, get help on their own, get housed on their own. People who maybe are too over the edge to kind of deal with community court and accept those services. So we're often dealing with people who are further down the line or have some crossover with community court. But we engage a lot of people. Try and the crossover there is that my partner, sorry, I get nervous talking. My partner from Lake County Behavioral Health worked previously with the FIT team there, so forensic intensive treatment team. And he still keeps a close tie with them, attending like usually daily meetings with them. And so our goal is to engage people out on the street, get people who want to work with us, get them engaged with the FIT team, and have the FIT team come down and do wraparound assistance with those people. And it's been successful with some people, and a lot of people are resistant. And again, a lot of these people are really difficult to work with. So it sometimes takes 10, 20 engagements to sort of move the ball with some of these people, because it's hard to get them to sit still long enough to do paperwork, or, you know, a lot of disabilities, a lot of barriers, you know, a lot of co-occurring disorders with these clientele. We're starting to branch out a little bit more and go outside of downtown occasionally for like suicidal subject type calls or mental health related calls. We took on kind of trying to help with a client out in West Eugene recently. Sort of bumped against patrol trying to do their thing, and tried to work with Lake County Behavioral Health and help that client. And the FIT team is still engaging with that client, so that's been in the long run productive. It's just a growing pain to try and figure out how we work together with patrol on those things, but it's been productive. And you know, in that case, it was someone who was calling hundreds of times and creating quite a disturbance in his neighborhood. So he's calling 911, tying up the lines, being a disturbance in this neighborhood, creating calls, and then not answering the door when people came to help, and just very, very mentally ill, struggling. So that person now is currently medicated, currently getting treatment. The FIT team is dealing with him very regularly. So that's a win for us, you know, lowering his number of contacts and making forward progress is what we're looking for. We're not always going to fix everything, but lowering the number of contacts is a positive thing. So you know, and it runs the gamut. Sometimes I could talk forever, so you have to cut me off.
Well, actually, let me pause you for a second here. I see a hand up from Commissioner Parham. Commissioner Parham, do you have a question for Officer Rankin?
Yeah, I was just curious, what happened to Cahoots and what is their role? It seems like there's like a diminished role And also, I'm curious the role of the county crisis responders as well in this. It seems like there's a little bit of a redundancy.
Yeah, I'll talk about that, Commissioner Parham. You're not wrong in many of your comments. Cahoots, we still have a contract with Cahoots. Cahoots is still a resource that is being utilized throughout our community. In this particular case, the downtown core was an area that we felt like would be a great place to essentially pilot a project like this because of the location of our downtown substation, the walkability of downtown, and the ability to walk to our service areas, and just the type of behaviors that we were seeing from a variety of the same individuals in that downtown core. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say, if it wasn't for our community safety payroll tax, we wouldn't be doing this kind of creative co-responder model. And so I appreciate the fact that we have that. We actually just hired our peer support specialist, just came on, which is a person with lived experience that is now a part of this team with Bo and Jose to do this work. So that's why we chose downtown. And it's not that Cahoots isn't still doing the work, but there's plenty of work for Cahoots to do in and around the city. You're not wrong in the sense that Cahoots has they've gone through a bit of a evolution of how that program is being run through Whitebird, changes in leadership, unionization of workers. There's just been a lot of moving parts to Cahoots. And very rarely is Cahoots ever staffed enough to be able to meet their obligation for the number of days a week and hours in a day that they can serve. And then enter mobile crisis, Lane County's mobile crisis, which by statute, Lane County is required to provide a mobile crisis response for people that are in a persistent and pervasive mental health condition. And so they finally stood that up this last year. And so we are still trying to get our feet underneath us as we triage these calls, determining which resource fits the need. Is it mobile crisis response because it's persistent and pervasive? Is it Cahoots response because it's a lower acuity welfare check or wellness check? And then of course the downtown co-responder team is doing a lot of their own work. So I think you'll see, as mobile crisis response continues to expand, I think you'll see the roles and responsibilities and the interfaces become more clearly defined. But we are certainly in a strange time operationally on who's supposed to be doing what.
Can I speak for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just say that I've always been a fan and supporter of the traditional Cahoots model. You know, it's been great for us over the years, and it has been complicated in the last few years for sure. But I still rely on them. And we, you know, just recently we got a call about a lady who was in crisis about a domestic violence situation downtown. Very stressed. She really wanted to get in the back of my car and feel safe and have that contact with us. And I was able to get Cahoots there and have them help me kind of grease the wheels to get her back into the mission and transport her there, so that we didn't have to transport her there in the back of a car. And so that we could use that relationship with them to do that. But the piece that I've always seen kind of missing with Cahoots is that they don't do case management. You know, there's no sort of case management or follow-up there. And that's something the FIT team and Lane County Behavioral Health can do and can offer. So that's that piece of the puzzle.
Officer Rankin, you started with a term that's unfamiliar to me, cold outreach.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm just gonna coin that right here, but I mean, we sort of just walk around or drive around downtown and look for people who are sitting on the street corner and sometimes stop and chat with them, say, hey, how's things going? So they might be trespassing, they might not, we might just stop and chat. A lot of times it's a lot of people who I know that we've had a lot of regular contact with. And if we see them not seemingly in crisis at the moment, then it's a good opportunity for us to kind of build that connection. So we do that a lot. Because while they're in crisis, it's not the best time to try and make that connection and get them plugged into services. But we're just trying to build a rapport with you.
I have questions from Vice Chair Shivers and then Councilor Groves.
Yeah, so one of the things on our work plan is English as a second language, and it strikes me that there might be some overlap with your folks. I was wondering if that was the case and if you had to use Google Translate or call in a translator.
Most of the time, most of the people I deal with speak English. My partner Jose speaks very fluent Spanish, and that's been helpful with a couple of people very recently. So that's been very helpful. I have used a translation program before on crisis calls, but I mean, most of the time, 99% of the people I'm dealing with speak English. So. Yeah, absolutely.
Counselor?
Thank you, Chair. Officer Rankin, how does restorative justice, community court, drug court, how does this fit in to what you're working with? Probably less drug court, but community court. And second question is, do you believe it's effective?
Program or community court?
Well, both.
Both. I'm a fan of community court. I started working with community court pretty much right when they came into being years ago. Often have worked back and forth with community court. Do you want to answer this question, sir?
About community court or about the co-responding? I mean, I think, you know, community court is an important alternative to the traditional court system. It's not uncommon for us to offer specialty courts. Community court's an example of that. Drug court, veterans court, mental health court, all of those are specialty courts that are important parts of our criminal justice system. Community court gives us a way to recognize that we have a demographic of individuals that engage in quality of life crime that might find their way into the criminal justice system that will not benefit from the traditional criminal justice system. And so what community court does is it gives them a pathway, if they so choose to engage, it gives them a pathway of access to an abundance of services to help so we lower the recidivism, the reoffending rate of those individuals. We see people that choose to engage in that program, we see a high success rate of reducing recidivism with those. Again, the key is they have to choose to want to engage in that. That's the challenge when it comes to that. As it pertains to the co-responder, I'm a big fan. It's hard not to be a big fan of something that I had a hand in trying to develop.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we had an idea of what we needed downtown. And traditional policing wasn't going to fix where many of our pain points were. And so the concept of co-responding is not new, but I think the way we're doing it is a little bit unique to other jurisdictions in the way that they're embedded with us. And the way Bo and Jose are on foot, shoulder to shoulder, seen as a team, walking around, engaging with people, and trying to get them on a kind of a path to wellness. I do think I'm excited to see what the addition of the peer support specialist is going to bring. And then I'm also excited that our hope is that we add another mental health practitioner or a QMHP or a QMHA to a team with another officer. So we have two teams, because right now it's just Bo and Jose and they can't work 24/7 and probably don't work on the weekends, I'm guessing, Bo. And so we need to think about making sure that we're providing those types of services as much 24/7 as we can.
What are Jose's credentials?
I believe he's a QMHP.
What type of QMHP? There's quite a few.
I don't know exactly. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Shivers?
Yeah, so mine is a commentary and then I'm going to make a motion. The commentary is that I'm very glad to see us developing these within an accountable system. I love Cahoots. I love a lot of the other places and private organizations that are often really, really helpful in tackling these problems from every direction. But something that has long concerned me is that as police funding falls, businesses don't stop protecting their interests. They just hire private security. Those private security are less accountable than our officers. And it frankly scares me that that seems to be the direction that the forces at work are moving in. So I'm very glad to see that we are not sitting idly by while that happens. And for my motion, I would move that we accept the policy as changed.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, and well, we can open discussion for the policy with the edits.
Would it be possible to pass Sergeant Kite out? One more.
Yes, Commissioner Reedy. Go ahead.
Did I promote you or?
Yeah. Well, he's sitting right next to the chief. He's got chief in front of his.
Peer support specialist.
Yeah.
What is,
I mean,
is that someone who's been mentally ill and on the street? Their peer in that sense, or?
essentially someone who has that lived experience.
Yeah,
So
okay.
most often, I think it's gonna be somebody who has, lived experience with mental illness or in their life somehow.
I'm happy to see you doing this. I suggested an idea exactly like this to Chief Kearns about 12 years ago. I don't think it went any further.
So did I, thank you.
Huh?
So did I, thank you.
All right. We're a team. I'll have us beards. There are more than a few rumors afoot that Cahoots is on the chopping block to one degree or another in the city's budget crisis. And having been told by officers that couldn't do our job without Cahoots, which you may or may not agree with, what do you see this situation developing, looking like? Should that happen? What you see, yeah.
I'm gonna insulate my office here.
Thank you.
So
I think I heard his answer.
Yeah, so Commissioner Rady, there are a variety of programs that are at-risk programs while we deal with this very difficult budget. There's no question. That remains to be seen what ends up staying or going or some iteration. So stay tuned on that, and that's certainly a lot of work to be done on that. I think what you will see is what will be interesting is when Cahoots was pretty much the only game in town, they had that market cornered. What will be interesting to see is as the county continues to stand up more and more capacity with mobile crisis, with the ability to potentially bill Medicare and Medicaid, whether or not that's going to become the preferred mechanism by which we reach out to deal with some of the people that are in a persistent mental health crisis. So I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball on that. I'm not quite sure, but it's not lost on me that there's a bit of uncertainty with the Cahoots program.
My question was more what the picture on the street is going to look like if that part of the picture drops out. What it will mean for your work and your work.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a resource that the officers take advantage of. Dispatch takes advantage of. This community for 30 some odd years has been, the muscle memory is strong when it comes to asking for Cahoots. Our sincerest hope is that we don't have a drop off of resource, that if it does drop off, it gets replaced with something that is timely. I think at the end of the day, we as a police department stay away from the discussions about who's providing the service and want to be in the discussions about making the services available.
I'll just add that right now we try and mesh all the services to best provide care for the people on the street. And we'll continue to do that depending on what they look like. My political answer there.
Counselor, yeah, I saw your hand up, but then it went back down.
I'm okay. I'm good, but thank you for checking on me.
Counselor Groves and then Commissioner Parham.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to address the rumor about Cahoots on the chopping block. We won't see the proposed budget from the city manager till April 30th. So there really hasn't been specifics. What there was presented to council during the course of the fire services fee that's out there right now. I specifically asked, could you give us an idea of what cuts might look like with some level of prioritization? So we got back 2 samples of what it might look like. One was a percentage across the board cut, which I personally would not support. And the second one was one that was weighted somewhat towards public safety, police and fire. And that one did have a Cahoots reduction. And again, those were just things that filled a slot to come up with the target of $11.5 million. And I was actually on the street working as a line firefighter when Cahoots came online back in 1980. We didn't even know who they were. They showed up on a call the very first night they were in service. couple guys in a white unmarked van and they popped out. And it's like, whoa, who are you? But I became very impressed with the service over time. There's definitely some tweaks that could improve it, but yeah, it's something I think we need to figure out how to say, because it does help capacity with some of our other resources, and fire gets drug into that a lot too. So,
Commissioner Byrne?
Yeah, I did want to raise a concern about item B5 in the for 18.3, which refers if force is required and circumstances permit, officers should consider all appropriate force options given the totality of the circumstances. And so we're talking about cahoots, and we're talking about the fact that cahoots was a large part of that is to cut down on those negative interactions. And so I would love to see language that says force, but possibly like not deadly force.
Commissioner Byrne, what page are you on?
That's on page 14 of the agenda that was sent out. And that is Eugene, that's under policy 418.3 B5.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe, sorry.
Go ahead, Vice Chair.
I believe just before that, on the page just before that, they talk about de-escalation. And that is, from what I'm reading, that is very much the first step in all of these interactions. De-escalation, delaying custody, and disengagement are part of the 483.2. You got it? Yeah. The section just before that one.
Chief Skinner?
Yeah, and I would just say that, unfortunately, in many of our policies, especially ones that involve interaction, whether it's mental health crisis response or any other response, is that we have to make space for the possibility that force is reasonable and necessary. And so part of this language, if you read this and understand Ninth Circuit, this covers some of our Graham factors when it comes to that perspective of how we define justified or reasonable force. It essentially talks about the appropriate force options given the totality of the circumstances. So I wish we didn't have to call out the fact that force might be used in these situations, but we've seen time and time again that sometimes these things do not go as planned, and if officers are put in harm's way, then they do have the right to defend themselves.
Did you use the term Graham factors? What does that mean?
Judge, you want to take over that part? I mean, it's
The case law regarding appropriate use of when it's appropriate to use
Oh,
force.
it's a reference to a case.
It's reference to a
Okay,
case,
I was
yeah.
thinking like.
Graham
the-
v.
the
Connor.
substances.
Graham v. Connor out of Ninth Circuit U.S. Supreme Court. What is that? 1989.
Mhm.
It basically defines all of the factors that we should take into consideration before we use force, and helps us better understand when force is reasonable and objective. So,
Commissioner Byrne?
Yeah, I guess I'm just asking if the use of deadly force can be excluded and taken out of this. And I know that that's probably not going to happen, but the department has a chance to really make people feel safe by taking that out, especially if it seems like the department is going more towards these type of interactions versus the cahoots or mobile crisis response unit. Yeah, so my concern with that is that it's not going to make our officers feel safe, and it's going to get them killed. The requirement in this section is that if force is required, and we can't judge that here, that is for the auditor, the CRB,
and eventually the courts to decide whether force was actually required in that circumstance. But to take it completely off the table is not just not possible, but I would morally oppose it.
Commissioner Lyman?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I first want to thank Commissioner Parham for parsing the policy and bringing up a specific section. And I'm having a little discomfort that there's a motion and we're about to pass this. This is a really meaty policy that has a lot of important things, and it's probably even beyond our scope of giving it the true attention. And so I'm expressing there's a lot of trust to the department, and the chief will review it and he'll make the changes that he deems appropriate. And I'll support the policy, but I think it is important that we dove into at least one of these sections. And this particular section I see purely as a statement of the law. And the change is an improvement in that it retreats from a reference to lethal force and just says, if you have to consider using force, use the your toolbox that you use every day to determine whether force is appropriate. And so I don't think it is encouraging or any way diminishes the de-escalation, as Commissioner Shivers pointed out, that is present in the policy. So.
Commissioner Parham, is your hand still up or is it up again?
No, I didn't lower it. It's lowered now.
Thank you. I have one question, Officer Rankin. What does Jose wear when he's out on the street with you? Because to me, you look like a cop with all the weapons and everything there. So what does Jose wear?
He's usually wearing a light blue polo shirt that depicts that he's a co-responder. The fit team all has this light blue polo, and he has a hat that matches and a gray jacket that says on the back, crisis response, I believe, on the back. So yeah, so he's clearly like kind of be able to help clearly, and that's how we introduced him as well.
Commissioner Reedy?
Yeah, in regards to policy 418.3, section 5, if we look on page 22 of our packet, which contains the changes that were made in the policy and comments by Sergeant Jordan, you'll notice there's a comment in the side there, which is the question of, in an encounter with an individual on the street, to have a different policy regarding use of force for an individual who is having a mental health crisis would require the officer to do a diagnosis on the spot and exclude certain options from use of force based on that diagnosis rather than the circumstances. Because a crazy person, excuse me if that's incorrect language, a person in a mental health crisis can be just as dangerous as a person in their right mind and is likely to be more unpredictable. And thus, to restrict the options in the circumstance, I think is unrealistic, and to expect something that could not happen. The officer could not say, this person is clearly mentally well, this person is clearly not mentally well. So if this guy's got a gun, I can go for mine, but if this guy's got a gun, I got to think about something else. I don't think that works.
Sergeant Jordan, I had a question on page 23 on our red line. I guess it's a blue line version. 418 3.1 B2. The word extremely is crossed out, which leaves it as irrational thoughts and beliefs that are fixed and unchangeable. My question on that is, why did we remove the words extremely? Because I mean, if I haven't had my lunch, I have irrational thoughts and beliefs that are fixed and unchangeable.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Generally speaking, we just, especially in legal writing and documents like this, avoid unnecessary intensifiers. And so we kind of, after looking into characteristics of a lot of different mental health issues, we thought that irrational thoughts and beliefs, and then pairing that with fixed and unchangeable, it seemed to still be a good indicator of a mental health issue, especially when paired with other things in this list. So, but that's,
thank you.
Yeah.
On page 25 in 418.3.4, section D at the top of page 25, although it doesn't state this, I am assuming that the person being transported is handcuffed per 418.5.1.
Let's see here.
That's affirmative.
This is. Yes. If the officers are transporting them, they're going to be handcuffed.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you. Towards the very end of it. The weapon, any weapon seized as evidence may be released, taken into custody for safekeeping. What is the retention period to, if it's never released back to the owner?
So that all depends on whether it was seized with consent or under a court order. And so it would vary. I don't know if that helps, but it could vary.
Okay. So if in this particular case, if there's a person with a mental health crisis, a weapon is seized to protect that person or the community, the owner of the weapon, say they gave their consent for the weapon to be seized, are they given a time frame on when they can expect to receive it back?
What would govern that is going to be the evidence control, evidence storage procedures and policies, as well as depending on, so in this scenario, are they being held on a peace officer's hold? Are they being evaluated medically? If then a doctor determines or a physician determines that they're not able to own these weapons anymore, or it goes before court in a guardianship or something like that, that can still alter that. And in that case, if they're found to be fit and there's no prohibition from them owning weapons, then theoretically they could get the weapon back. And ECU, our evidence control unit, would release that according to that. If there are other steps in the process with courts and physicians, then that could hold things up further. So
It's been my experience that purging of those things is years before we do that. There's not a very quick turnaround on that. Having been charged with many property and evidence rooms, that's the number one thing that plagues the property and evidence room, is that we hold on to stuff too long. So without knowing exactly what the retention period is on that, what I can assure you is that it is a significant length of time that we hold on to those things, that somebody could come and claim from.
Thank you, Chief. Vice Chair Chambers.
Yeah, so I noticed that we don't have the CIT coordinator and that we're removing almost all references to it in policy. First question is, why don't we have the coordinator anymore? And the second one is, are they coming back at any point? So do we want to actually keep them in the policy?
okay, so typically we've this policy was written when not every officer was CIT trained, and so it was kind of like a pilot program. And you know, based on the time frame, that makes sense. That's when a lot of states or a lot of departments in the state started training officers for that. Now we are predominantly training every officer that's new, or laterals. We get them trained if they haven't already received the training. So pretty much everybody is a CIT officer. And so the need for a CIT coordinator kind of went away with that, for lack of a better term. And frankly, we just have gone away from some of these practices because it's so ingrained in all of our day-to-day functioning that it's just unnecessary. So.
Officer Rankin, when you're out with Jose and you're addressing an individual on the street, can you give us an idea of how a normal, if there is such a thing, interaction goes?
Yeah, I mean, most of the time I just go up and introduce myself, and either I introduce Jose or he introduces himself, and we stop and say, hey, we're out about today trying to offer services. Are you interested in talking to us about services today? And kind of leave it as open-ended as possible, right? So, and that may be on a trespass call, or it might be someone who's just sitting idly at the corner who we recognize as a frequent contact. Seems like in a good place today, so maybe we'll try and have a contact with that person. It's usually very low key, and if they want to stop and talk to us, then we'll stop and talk, and we kind of gauge who they're more comfortable talking to. You'd be surprised, some people would rather talk to me. I've been down there a long time. I have a relationship with a lot of people. So sometimes they want to talk to me and sometimes they don't want to talk to me at all. I stand off a little bit and let Jose do his thing. Present a safe atmosphere, but sometimes we go back and forth work together. So, which right now is kind of our, the healthiest relationship we have is when we can do it together. Because we both have things to offer, solutions to offer, but yeah, we try and work that.
How frequently do you transport a person in your car versus in a cahoots van or in the LCBH van?
It's an interesting question. So I haven't actually had Lane County Behavioral Health respond to any of my calls yet, as far as their crisis team. I know that I think Sergeant Jordan has dealt with them a little bit when she was still downtown. I have met most of those people. Cahoots though, I mean, I would often prefer someone in crisis that if I can get them in the back of my car peacefully and safely and they're okay with that, then that's great. But if it's going to stress them out more, I'd like to get them back to Cahoots. So I'd say rather frequently I try and coax someone in the back of a Cahoots van voluntarily rather than going in the back of my car, because I'm gonna have to put them in handcuffs. That's not really ideal. But sometimes these are very cooperative people who sort of want to go down to the hospital and get some help. I don't really want to put them through that. And some people are just more than willing to put on the handcuffs to get in the back of the car. But a lot of people, it's not very comfortable. So we use Cahoots quite a bit for that.
Thank you. Commissioner Reedy.
Yeah, I had only one. I wish there was some way we could find to print or post the corrected version of policy in type, where I don't need both my reading glasses and a magnifying glass, but I know everybody else reads things on a screen where you can magnify it, but I'm just a tech geezer, so. The only thing I found was on page 21 of our package in the definitions. And this is probably absolutely pickiness. But well down, it says this condition that results from mental health symptoms, treatment interruption, or extreme psychological stressors. Now, my background is in medicine to some extent, not mental health. And no condition results from symptoms. Symptoms are a sign of a condition. On the other hand, my wife, whose background is in mental health work, told me no, depression can be both a symptom and a diagnosis. So I'm probably just being picky there, but it just seemed a condition, as I understand it, does not result from symptoms. They're having symptoms that lets you know they've got a condition. And among the symptoms, or among the causes may be treatment interruption or extreme psychological stressors. And there are others. And so that's probably not even worth messing with. But
I agree
it
with
struck
you.
me.
No, I agree with you, and I think something tells me that maybe the wrong word just got plugged in there, so, but it
Yeah.
definitely needs a second look, so you're right, thank you.
I think it's just describing mental health conditions.
Yes.
Commissioner Parr.
And this policy that we're going over right now is specifically for CIT trained officers, correct?
It's for all officers, sorry, it's for all officers, and yeah, primarily everybody is CIT trained, so.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion of policy 418? We do have the motion still on the table to approve the policy with the edits that Sergeant Jordan has submitted, and I assume also with Commissioner Reedy's edit that Sergeant Jordan has accepted. Do I need to move?
No, it's already been.
Move to vote? Okay. All right. All in favor of approving policy 418 with the proposed edits, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Please say nay or raise your hand.
Nay.
Commissioner. Thank you. And any abstentions? Did we get a vote from Commissioner Folks? Where's she at?
Aye.
No. The motion passes. Mental health crisis response policy 418 is with the edits is approved. Our next item on the agenda, actually our next two items on the agenda, relate to the work retreat that we had in 2023 when we made our 2-year work plan. Two items that were very heavily upon the minds of some of the commissioners at that time were mutual aid and disciplinary matrix. These are not necessarily policies for us to review, but more for us to receive education on from the chief. And so Chief Skinner has given us some extra time tonight to provide that education to us.
Thank you, Chair. I did not come with anything prepared, but I certainly am willing to have this discussion. Both of these items, as much energy as the commission had at one point around wanting to have this discussion, as the chair alluded to, didn't have a really close nexus to the policy. The mutual aid overview, the genesis of having the conversation on mutual aid came out of the time in 2020 when we were dealing with a significant amount of civil unrest in our community and had to call upon mutual aid to come help us with that civil unrest, namely the Springfield Police Department, and the desire to try and create a policy by which we could impose a level of accountability for those people when they came into Eugene. And so it became very apparent to me very quickly that we don't have the ability to impose our accountability mechanism on other police officers that are in our jurisdiction, number one. And number two, abandoning our mutual aid agreements because of that does not serve the best interest of this community, because on any given day, we may need to lean on each other in a moment of crisis. There have been times where the Eugene Police Department has been tied up on a significant event that has drained every resource we have, and that Springfield is available to cover our priority calls for us and for them. There's mutual aid where high-speed pursuits, legitimate and justified high-speed pursuits, go into each other's jurisdictions, and we may need to meet each other's needs. And God forbid that we have an active threat at one of our schools, campuses, or places of business. We don't want to have a chilling effect on other police officers choosing not to come into our jurisdiction because they are somehow not in agreement with our policies or our oversight mechanisms. So I didn't feel like that was squarely in the wheelhouse of the police commission around adjusting those policies. That is much more of an agreement between jurisdictions that is deeply rooted in relationship and common police practices. And while not perfect, is something that's important that stays in place. So let me stop there and see if there's any questions about that particular concept of mutual aid.
Raise your shooters.
Yeah, so I was here when all of that was happening, and one of the things that you did at the time and said at the time that I found very reassuring was that when you called in those resources, you deployed them on the easy stuff, for lack of a better term, and that in the most stressful and fraught instances, you used EPD officers who are accountable to all the things we're talking about. So thank you.
Yeah, and just to reiterate that, where we have that discretionary time, we want Eugene police officers having first steps with Eugene people. There's no question about that. You know, there are going to be, and I'm hoping there's never a situation, but here's a great example. If we were to have a critical active threat, for instance, at Holt Elementary School, which is dangerously close to the Springfield jurisdiction, you as a parent would not want to tell you Springfield, don't come over the bridge and serve that community until EPD gets there if we're not, you know, if we can't get there. So, you know, and not in every case that's going to happen, but certainly where we have discretionary time, we want to make sure that it's Eugene police officers dealing with Eugene problems.
Commissioner Lyman.
Thank you, Chair. The last time I recall this coming up here at this forum was Dove Medical protest and calling in Springfield, and they showed up in SWAT in tactical and we were not in tactical. And that I recall, I know to me, there was a lack of, you know, when you invite them to come, you want them to come. And the answer we got then was, we can't control how they deploy. And I think, you know, I clearly, like, I don't, it's important, it's a time tested and true thing you need to have mutual aid, but that was the issue. And I think that it remains a concern. It's just that, you know, that, and maybe it's relational and your counterpart and expectations, but that seems to be the concern that this commission had at least a couple of years ago.
And I can appreciate that concern, you know, in a variety of situations, there are things that happen at moment's notice that overwhelm us, like what happened in the corner of 7th and Washington in May of 2020. And then there's things that we are prepared for, that we can have some of these conversations about how we show up. I think our sincerest hope is that in those moments, regardless of how they look, is that we would ask them to come and we would deploy them under kind of Eugene police authority and supervision, where we can monitor and direct their activity, as opposed to them just showing up and doing their own thing. And so we're very mindful of that as we continue to work with other jurisdictions.
Commissioner Reedy and then folks.
Yeah, I had a good deal of experience with mutual aid around the University of California during the 60s. I think some days we saw as many as 12 or 15 different departments all deployed on campus. And the thing that has struck me since was I became a shrewd observer of the different departments and knew how far you had to stand away from them to be safe. And it was very different for different departments. In particular, the Alameda County deputy sheriffs established a reputation as a totally lawless, undisciplined, wild bunch that persisted from the early 60s through the 90s. And I talked to a veteran of that department who told me, yeah, that's about what it was like. That's why I'm not in it anymore. Now, I don't know if we have any such anywhere in the Willamette Valley that you might ever feel the need to call on. I would only hope that if we were in such a circumstance, you'd know who they are and would call other people first. And if, you know, there was no other way around it, you know, okay, you know, when we need people, we need people. But, and I don't even know if this is necessary. There may not be such a wild bunch operating around here, but if there are, I'm certain you will not extend them an invitation unless it's really necessary. That's all. I don't expect the Eugene Police to discipline officers from other departments, and the approach of using them to cover the less critical situations is obviously the right one.
I can say that our closest partnership is obviously Springfield PD and Wayne County Sheriff's Office. Both the leadership in both of those areas has been fantastic. I've seen an evolution of Springfield PD under the supervision and leadership of Chief Andy Shearer, who is stepping away tomorrow, and now is going to be Acting Chief Jamie Resch, being really good, engaged in relational leadership. That I don't see any issues as we move.
Sure, folks.
Thank you. And I suppose this kind of just coincides with this conversation Commissioner Reedy and Chief had. So when it comes to mutual aid, are there set designations or agreements upon certain agencies? So specifically, do you only work with Lane County Sheriff, Springfield Police, Oregon State Police, or is that really just an overarching term to say, you know, we could reach out to Salem Police if needed? Is it really more?
Yep, I know exactly where you're going with this.
Thank you,
folks. Generally speaking, mutual aid is specific to your agencies that are adjacent to your jurisdiction that you would most likely be involved with. And I would say from time to time, we would call on maybe a different agency to help us out, but it's not necessarily in the same construct of the mutual aid, operational mutual aid that we're talking about today. For instance, right now we have a internal affairs investigation that we needed to have a criminal investigation done on, and we reached out to the Salem Police Department to grab a criminal investigator that's not in our area to conduct that. And so we do reach out to those other agencies for help, and we lend resources to each other, but under the premise of mutual aid. Operationally here in Eugene, it's mostly Lane County Sheriff, Springfield, and to some extent a small contingent of OSP that's in the Springfield office.
Chief Skinner, what about those football games over at Oxen Stadium? I see law enforcement officers from several agencies, I think.
That is an agreement that is shepherded by the University of Oregon and University of Oregon Police Department. That's a contract, reimbursable overtime contract with a variety of agencies that allow for officers to sign up to come down and work overtime. So it's not the type of mutual aid that we kind of see here, kind of in a moment of crisis or for like a planned protest or something that we're doing there. That's more of a contractual obligation between the University of Oregon and outlying agencies to help fill that staffing need.
When Springfield Police or Lane County Sheriff's Office comes over to assist with the situation, are they all being dispatched by our dispatchers?
So if they come to our jurisdiction, then our expectation is that we have the radio interoperability that we take over the crisis, the emergency communications for that. In any multi-jurisdictional approach, one of the biggest things that can break down, and this is for both police and fire, is our inability to communicate with each other. So we have to make sure that that's in place. So if they're coming over here, they're on our channel communicating with our people.
Other questions for Chief Skinner on mutual aid? All right. Disciplinary matrix overview.
This is another area that I felt like was going to be a bit of a challenge, and from a policy perspective around a discipline matrix. There's a couple of really interesting nuances to this. Number one is that's deeply rooted in labor management negotiations or it's a bargainable impact when you think about having a discipline matrix for somebody. So any policy that would come out of this group about what they felt like we should be doing on discipline would have to be bargained. And so that is challenging to get to yes on policy language on that. The second piece of this is the Oregon State Legislature embarked on an endeavor in either the long session in 2001 or 2003, where we already have a discipline matrix that's codified in legislation that identifies the misconduct or serious misconduct. It identifies presumptive discipline, and then it identifies ranges of discipline based on aggravating and mitigating circumstances. So we already have a document that guides kind of our starting point for discipline as it pertains to the type of conduct that we're looking into. So in many cases, it already exists. And discipline is a nuanced situation because, here in the state of Oregon and in the state of Washington, actually, are both interest arbitration states. Here in Oregon, our employment and our employment-related discipline is governed by the Employment Relation Board, ERB, and case law, where you look at similar types of discipline and what are similar types of misconduct and what other discipline has been administered. And so it's just nuanced to the extent that it's hard for a body like this to just sit down and make a policy that this is what we want, and likely would not be successful in that. And so I was just pointing out that I would encourage the commission to steer away from those things that are going to take legislative changes and or bargainable impacts for the union, because those are really tough ones to accomplish.
And what is the legislation title?
I knew you were going to ask me that because I'm getting to know you so well. I don't know off the top of my head, but
That's put people on the spot.
I know she does. But I can get you a copy of that. Allison's probably, if I just stumble through this for another 30 seconds,
Okay, cool.
It's an appendix to our 10-point policy already, so.
Good job.
So, yeah, so what's that?
There's also the PECBA.
Yeah,
Public
yeah,
Employee Collective
yeah.
Bargaining.
Public employee collective bargaining has opinions on all sorts of collective bargaining issues. We got a lot of people that weigh in on how we should do things and why.
Commissioner Lyman.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to shout out a thank you to Cindy Coleman sitting over there and Professional Standards, because their annual report, when I was on CRB, the Civilian Review Board, it's very frustrating to read, to go through these investigations and to invest all the time, and there's a finding of a violation, and then you have no idea like what happened. There was no correlation, and that was very frustrating, and I was kind of over and over, and then I finally figured out you can take the annual report from the auditor, and you can take the annual report from Eugene Police Professional Standards, and they at least release how many officers were terminated, or how many got suspended, or how many got counseled, or so the numbers are there. And then if you invest the energy in looking at what happened during the year, in terms of the discipline reported through the auditor, you can see and you can tell and you can get a sense of that it's not freewheeling, because you have this rigorous auditor, this rigorous investigation, and then absolutely no, did anything happen? There's no sentencing, you just don't know. But so in conjunction with the public information that they release from Professional Standards, you can get a sense of the robustness of, how the chief deals with it when it ends up at his desk.
House Bill 2930.
Thank you. Off the top of your head, Chief, are there? I'm ready. I'm looking for a number right now.
Hold on. Serious standby.
What sort of offenses would be considered in grounds for immediate suspension or termination?
Well, I mean, they're all nuanced, but I will tell you that in our line of work, there are certain things that are likely outcomes are gonna be termination. Certainly truthfulness, allegations of truthfulness, sustained allegations of truthfulness are likely career enders. Any criminal conduct, not any, but many criminal conducts. We've had officers that have, like many people in our community, have made mistakes. For instance, DUI is a good example where we've seen officers recover from that. But there's many instances of criminal conduct that would result in termination. Persistent and significant sexual harassment or sexual misconduct within the organization likely results in termination. Below that, there are a variety of things that would result in suspension, anywhere from a 1-day suspension up to a week or 2 weeks of suspension. It's hard to classify all of those because some of those are based on the totality of the investigation, what we've learned, how it matches up with other similar behavior and other similar disciplines that have been administered. We take that into consideration, but I've taken it upon myself as the department head to, the goal is to change behavior. And there are some behaviors that are terminable offenses that there's just no wiggle room for. And then there's others that don't necessarily neatly or should neatly fall into this kind of matrix of documented counseling, oral reprimand, written reprimand, suspension, demotion, or termination. There can be a combination of those. And then I've gotten a little bit creative in my time where I've added some things that are not in that discipline ladder to get people's attention. I remember a time where I had an individual that was struggling with their own self-awareness and the way they showed up with their coworkers, and I think it was a reprimand coupled with a required reading, and they had to write me a book report. And I know that for that officer at that time, it felt really demeaning to do that. But at the end of that process, what that officer would have told you, and this is in former organization, what that officer would have told you is that was the best thing that they ever we're forced to do, is to take a look at themselves and try to grow from that situation. So it's a hard one to answer as far as if this, then this, if this, then this, because they're all so nuanced.
Vice Chair Shivers. Oh, Commissioner Rady.
That all makes very good sense. Situations are always nuanced, and this, then that, then this is likely to miss some of the details. My problem, and I've had a consistent problem, and I have no resolution to it in sight. And that's not because of failure of anybody. It's just because the problem is kind of intractable, and that's this. I have a good deal of confidence from my observation of the department and its leadership that it does right by discipline. That it has the right attitudes, the right priorities, and the right understanding of what the public wants, demands, and what's good for the department. I have considerable confidence. But I also know of officers who have done things that are on the public record. And I don't know what the result of that was, and I will never know. That information is not something that we can do, and I have read through the annual reports and gotten and that's a very valuable thing. See just how much discipline was applied. And the idea that discipline is not being applied as punishment, but as correction is a good principle to go by. My worry is we will have a new leadership in the department in a few years. And I don't know who we get. And I've seen some of the other candidates we had last time, and I would not be as confident. But I can't tell because for really good reasons, there is no transparency on the discipline. I mean, there are reasons for my not being able to have that information. There are enough bogus complaints filed against officers, and having all, if someone has made a mistake and now is correcting it, having that aired in public is not something that anybody wants on their job. But that still leaves me just not knowing what goes on behind the door, which, as a responsible member of the public who's an interest in this and believes the Eugene Police Department has a very good attitude, approach, and runs well. But other things happen now and again, and we all know that. And I just have no way, as a member of the public, of feeling totally secure that, yeah, if someone messes up like this, something will happen. And I don't know how to satisfy that. I mean, I've had long talks to the head of the union about that. And, we both understand each other's position and respect it very much, but we can't get between there. The two things are not compatible. So if anyone has any thoughts on that, I would appreciate it.
Vice Chair Shivers does.
I do, in fact, and especially because we have more attention than usual, I want to run down the ecosystem for folks at home and folks here who aren't already aware, if you're not already aware. But we have 4 bodies as part of police accountability. We are about policy, procedure, resource allocation. We look at what the department is doing at a systemic level. On the infraction level, we have internal affairs if there's any criminal conduct, but we also have the independent auditor's office, which is for everything south of that. Everything that is, this officer was rude to me up to they drove through my front porch or whatever. You report that to the independent auditor, and every month the civilian review board will take a selection of those and review them in more depth. The auditor and the chief's office will talk about appropriate discipline, and the civilian review board or arbitration, not discipline. So that's why you heard previously that the department said there was no fault, but the auditor's office said something did go wrong. But the Civilian Review Board will take a look at a smattering of these cases, particularly socially fraught ones, and they will give public input. So if you are interested in being more involved in this system, once a year, usually once a year, sometimes it's special, but you can apply to be on the Police Commission or the Civilian Review Board. Now to Jack's point about how to solve what I agree is probably the biggest systemic problem, which is that nobody knows how these things actually turn out. On the Civilian Review Board, you need to take a background check because you get all of the personal information of everybody involved, including the victims. So it's a really sensitive position. So they need to be background checked. For that same reason, I think that is the ideal place to, as part of their duties, get a report about what discipline was conducted after some of these investigations. That would require an act of the city council and probably an ORS change, as well as union stuff that I'm not personally, I can't give you a recipe on how to do it, but talking to city council would be an excellent way to move that along. And applying to be on one of these bodies would be an excellent way to get more involved and to have your voices heard. So thank you, everybody, and
Thank you for beating me.
sorry for grandstanding.
Counselor Ye.
Yeah, thanks. Chief, I had a question. For complaints of like internal complaints of sexual harassment or discrimination, are those handled in EPD just like any other city department?
No, actually, those are also under the purview of the auditor's office. So any complaints, now we may enlist the help of ERC or Human Resources to help us better understand or be involved in the process of that. Like for instance, if respectful work environment complaint, we would involve them. But generally speaking, then there might be some nuances that wouldn't take us there. But generally speaking, any complaint internal like that would go through the auditors. If it's a EPD employee, would go through the auditor's office for classification and an allegation language.
Oh, okay. All right, thanks.
Any other questions for Chief on disciplinary issues? All right, thank you, Chief, for bringing that one to light for us. We'll move to setting the biennial planning retreat date. So every 2 years, the Police Commission has a work retreat for several hours where we go typically off-site and we build out our work plan for the next 2 years. And then Vice Chair and then whoever the chair and vice chair are that are elected after that will present it to City Council for approval. The options for dates that we have this year typically are our work retreat is in May. It sounds like in the past they've been on Saturdays. We have a couple of options that we've offered for May 10th or May 17th from 9 to 2 p.m. I have asked Jeremy to give us another option of what would normally be our regular Police Commission meeting date of Thursday, May 8th, and we'll make it a longer meeting. So we would start at 4 p.m. and we would have time blocked until 9, but if we can get done sooner, then I don't think anybody objects to going home earlier. So our options right now for consideration, Thursday, May 8th, 4 to 9, Saturday, May 10th, 9 to 2, or Saturday, May 7th, 9 to 2, 17th, 9 to 2. And I'll open for discussion. Vice Chair?
Yeah, so I would recommend, having been through this a couple of times, I would recommend holding this meeting on a Saturday because it can be an all-day thing. And I don't want to not do its due diligence. That being said, holding it on Thursday might get more participation from some folks. So it is possible. I would not love that.
Thank you. Commissioner Reedy?
Yeah, I like the Saturdays. I'll go for either one of them.
Any other comments, opinions, weigh-ins?
If we're taking count, I can do either Saturday also.
Okay. Commissioner Neal?
Both, sorry, both, Saturdays are difficult for me. The 10th is probably easier.
I can only do the 10th.
All right, so it sounds like so far we have a couple of votes for Saturday, May 10th. I can do that as well. Vice Chairman sounded like you would be able to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Chief Skinner.
Are you asking me if I'm available, ma'am?
I am.
I can't think of anything I'd rather do on my than spend time with you and this commission. I think
We
it's
appreciate you too, sir.
I think I am free on May 10th.
Begrudgingly.
I'll make it work.
Commissioner Folks.
Thank you. So May 11th is Mother's Day. I don't know if that impacts anybody's decision, but I wanted to put that out there. I will be out of the state at that time. Can I join virtually?
Looking around the room, it sounds like we can offer a virtual option. We prefer to do as much of it in person as possible. I suppose.
Maybe we should try for the Thursday then.
If the next day is Mother's Day, that should apply to me, and I think I deserve that entire weekend.
Saturdays are really hard for me because I facilitate healing circles for kids in Lake County on those days. So Thursday would be preferable, but y'all will make your decision.
So the reason why we had offered Thursday, May 8th is because that's the day that we would normally have a police commission meeting if we were regularly meeting at police commission in May. And
That's what I'm saying. So Thursday I'm available, but Saturdays are like hard nose for me.
Thank you, Commissioner Parham. Right now I'm trying to talk Commissioner Rady into it. Not to call you out or anything.
I could do it, but I'd rather the Saturday. I could do it.
I'm in the exact same boat. For me, I think it is very important that we do meet in person, not just for team building, but because we're having really nuanced discussions throughout this. So I will put in for a long meeting as well on Thursday.
Commissioner Rady?
Yeah, Jeremy raised with me the question that we're at least a couple members short. We are about to get some new members on the commission. If we do our next year's planning without the new members, we will be missing something. On the other hand, we want to get it done soon, and I do not know the timeline for when we're going to be getting our reinforcements.
Yeah, so usually we have new commissioners come on afterwards, after this planning retreat. I will speak from experience as one of those folks who was appointed at a weird time because I was filling in for somebody else. I was put in just before the planning retreat, and all of my biggest mistakes happened because I was new on the commission and I didn't know what we were doing or the best way to do it. So I came in with a lot of ideas that were not workable given our scope. So I would recommend offering a plan to the new commissioners because that's a much easier launch into being a commissioner.
Jeremy, what is the history of our having a work retreat in May? I was just looking at our bylaws to see if our bylaws require that.
So, yes, you need to have it in May, in short, because you are going to, in June, the commission is going to approve the annual report, the work that you've completed, as well as approve taking that new biennial work plan to council for approval. So that way you have an approved work plan, you're not working out of work plan.
In order to align with
In
the
July,
fiscal year,
in order
correct?
to align with, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
You are required by the ordinance, police commission ordinance, to have a work plan developed on an annual basis. The police commission moved to a biennial work plan, and so if there are updates made, we still provide that work plan to council on an annual basis to comply with the ordinance, but yeah, this year is the whole development of the new biennial work plan.
Commissioner Lyman?
Yeah, two things, respectfully and, respectful of his time, but also of the process that we're planning, like, are we really, is the chief really a
Not
seat
for the
at the
whole time.
table at that?
We don't require him for the whole time.
Okay, all right, fair enough. No, I'm happy to have you, but it seems like we're planning and we're, you know.
I thought we were getting along famously.
We are.
Yeah.
And now Commissioner Lyman is uninvited you.
And the other, no, I'm happy to have him. I just think, you know, in fact, your acting last month, we had him in opening comment. We extended a seat at the table to him as well. My second thing is, I'm in favor of full participation, and if people can't make it on the Saturday, then I would prefer the Thursday. I'd rather have the members present.
Jeremy?
Oh, I just wanted to say yes, Chief Skinner generally comes in the beginning to let you know what would be helpful for the police department and to provide that input, and then leaves so that you can perform your work. And then it's usually helpful to have somebody from law enforcement, and I'll look into who might be good at that, and weigh in on the policy side of it, just to make sure that everything on this list is something
We're
that
not
is
picking
possible.
discipline, we're not picking all the
And
things that we
that-
can't do anything about, so
Right.
that makes sense, but that is a level below the pay grade of.
I will work with Chief to identify who makes sense for that.
Thank you. We'll find that person. Our policy sergeant is gonna be celebrating her first Mother's Day.
That's true.
Yeah.
On that Sunday,
That's right.
which we're pretty excited about having the new addition to the chief's.
Is requiring an officer to attend these meetings considered part of the discipline matrix?
What did you do, Sergeant? Counselor Gross, is Thursday, May 8th work for you?
I would prefer Thursday, but
It sounds like that's the consensus right now. Chief, will you?
my experience has always been, you set the meeting for 2 hours, you need to take 2 hours. If you set it for 4 hours, you need to take 4 hours. I mean, I filled the time.
Yep. Chief Skinner, can you join us on Thursday, May 8th?
You're already on my schedule, ma'am, so my guess is that I can.
Okay. Commissioner Folks, does that work for you as well?
That will work.
All right, we have pretty much of a consensus. Jeremy will, and Vice Chair and I will start working on details as far as the wheres. And all right, so with that, since that particular issue, before we go into closing comments, we have a departure coming up, not from the police commission, but from Eugene Police Department. Cindy Coleman, I believe, is retiring after how many gazillion years of service? 30. Oh my goodness. So we wanted to extend a huge thank you for all of the time that you've devoted to EPD and the expertise that you've brought to police commission. You've kind of come and sat here and been many times a silent observer, but every time we've called on you, you've had the answers we needed. Thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward to retirement. But it's also been a wonderful career here at EPD and the city, so I'm very grateful. Thank you.
I'm not letting her off the hook that easy.
Oh, is this like Sergeant Barag, how you just brought her back?
That's exactly what's gonna happen. So there's no way, there's no chance we replace Cindy in this scenario. We've, as a police department and professional standards, which I know is near and dear to this commission, we have thought, we have talked about long and hard how we replace 24 years of legacy and historical information. There's no way to do that. At least in the foreseeable future, what I've decided to do is we have two really capable sergeants in internal affairs right now. I'm going to make one of them an acting lieutenant to take over some work in this space and give them some growth opportunities. We're going to let Cindy go off and tour Europe for 3 weeks or a month.
And then when she gets back, we're gonna talk a little bit about how we can have a bit of a phone a friend relationship on maybe a creative contract, because there's no chance that we're not gonna have questions. Like that could be easily answered. It's just an efficiency thing. Instead of us spending an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out the answer, we could likely call Cindy and have the answer within minutes. So I'm not quite letting her away from the family just yet, but we're excited for her, and she's certainly earned this, well-deserved retirement.
It's like Hotel California, you can check out anytime you like.
You can never leave. Yeah.
Do you want to answer them, Jeremy?
Only that I'm gonna miss you.
Look
So,
at that, you come back and she leaves. What does that tell you? It was planned before you. Since I missed opening comments, I wanted to express appreciation to a couple of commissioners. One, Clay Neal, very graciously and excellently chaired the Civilian Review Board meeting this week. I had the pleasure of watching that, and he was quite helpful with that. And then also Commissioner Folks has joined me at the Eugene Citizens Police Academy. And not surprisingly to anybody on our current police commission, she always has the most questions and with the most depth. So we'll go to closing comments and get Jeremy.
before we do, earlier, and I don't mean to correct anybody, but the LEMHW subcommittee, if it is going to make a contribution to a statement of the work as part of its the biennial report that is coming due, we need to do that and have these meetings in the next 2 months to be able to make the. So it's not a 4 or 5 month commitment. If anybody wants to consider being a part of that, as Jackie mentioned before, it's more like a 2 month commitment.
2 meetings, come on.
I just wanted to throw it out there because it's a different ask.
Thank you for providing that lens. All right, closing comments, Vice Chair.
Yeah.
Do we still have public comment?
We did first round of public comment, but because it's on the agenda.
Okay, do we have any others for public comment?
Not currently virtual, but we could invite them very soon if you like.
I think we checked with everybody. So thank you all. I appreciate it. And I appreciate all that.
Now closing comments.
Yeah, that's my closing comment.
Great. All right, Commissioner Rady.
Yeah, and thanks folks for coming out. We're pretty aware, but we really appreciate you bringing it to our attention further. And I hope that we learned something from it, and I hope maybe you picked up some things too. And we're all in it together. See what we do. And I want to thank Sergeant Rankin for joining for Rankin.
Sure, we can promote him.
Okay, Officer Rankin. Appreciate his coming out here tonight.
Commissioner Lyman.
Thank you, Chair. I also wanted to thank the public for coming and commenting. It's appreciated, and for staying for our meeting, that's also appreciated. Thank you. And Cindy, I was happy to give you a shout out in your last meeting that I had no idea. So, and it's really been both at CRB and here. The information from professional standards has just always been there when you need it, and really reliable and helpful. So thank you. Thank you for your service. And thank you to the recorder over there for the work that you're doing. And city staff is here and appreciate it. So thank you.
Commissioner Neal.
Thanks everyone, particularly Cindy. Happy retirement, and thanks for maybe coming back with a limited amount of time in the future to help out. But yeah, thanks for everything over the past 30 years.
Councilor Ye.
Thanks, Chair. Congratulations, Cindy. I don't even know what to say. It's weird to even think of you not being here. But I'm so glad that you get to enjoy some time to yourself with your family. Yeah, and being open to coming and giving us a hand is very generous of you. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Parr?
I just wanted to thank the folks that came today to speak and offer public comment. I think it's super important for our community to be involved in these meetings. And I also wanted to just send my thoughts and prayers to Holly. Thank you.
Commissioner Folks?
Congratulations, Cindy, on graduating work. I hope you get to have all of the fun adventures ahead of you. Thank you for citizens coming out and being a part of this. We talk about a lot of stuff, policy and whatnot, and it's nice to have folks engaged. And I here to joining the mental health subcommittee. We're a fun bunch. We're a lot of fun and quite engaging, and we have great conversations. So please join us. Thank you.
Councilor Groves?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming tonight and sharing your thoughts and opinions. I agree with my fellow commissioners. That's important to hear all sides of these issues, and that's appreciated. And Cindy, you're back in the early days.
Did. Remember 1999?
I think I missed that year.
Yeah. Emergency Operations Center?
Yes, we
Yeah,
did.
we were there together.
That's right. Well, anyway, thank you so much. You've just always been a stellar. I appreciate that. So, and that's it.
Okay. The first few police commission meetings I came to, I remember seeing Cindy sitting there, and I finally leaned over to Dallas and said, "Who is that woman? She comes to every single meeting. Does she not have a life?" And it turns out you belong here with us. So now I'm going to be looking for you every single time I come in. And for the folks from the public who came to join us this evening, thank you. I'm very sorry I missed it. I can't wait to watch the recording and see what you brought to us. The whole point of running for chair was so I didn't have to miss all the really cool stuff that happens. And so I am bummed that I missed it, but thank you very much for coming in and providing your voice. And with that, meeting is adjourned.
On order, before we adjourn, we never approved the minutes of the last meeting.
Yeah, we did with universal consent.
No, we did not. It was never up, it was never discussed, and there are lots of corrections needed. I suggest we do it at the next meeting.
All right, we'll review the recording and bring it up in the next meeting if it's required. Thank you.
And E. coli was the.
E. coli.
Oh,
Okay.
Opportunity.
This is your last one.
No, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see.